Meanwhile, former Chadian President Hissène Habré was sentenced to life in jail for war crimes and crimes against humanity in what's been a long-awaited verdict for the relatives of some 40,000 people who were killed during his term in the 1980s. Gabrielle Weiniger with the story.
It's been called a trial on behalf of Africa. Former Chadian President Hissène Habré has been sentenced by a Senegal court to life imprisonment for crimes against humanity, torture, rape and sexual slavery.
Compte tenu de la situation personnelle de Hissène Habré,
the chamber concludes, after taking into account the gravity of the crimes committed and the personal situation of Hissène Habré, that the aggravating factors far outweigh the mitigating ones. Therefore, Hissène Habré, the chamber sentenced you to life imprisonment, however, without confiscating property.
The former dictator has lived in Senegal since he was toppled from power in a 1990 coup, and it took 16 years to get him into the dock. Political wrangling over whether he should be tried in Africa or Europe delayed justice for the thousands of victims who demanded he pay for his crimes. But last year, Senegal agreed to prosecute the former president, the first time a court of one country has tried the ex-ruler of another for human rights abuses. Abuses that a Chadian Truth Commission said included 40,000 murders and 200,000 cases of torture. The commission documented admissions of survivors detailing his methods, including electric shocks, cigarette burns, and gas squirted in the eyes of his opponents, who were often members of minority ethnic groups. Habré refused to acknowledge the legitimacy of the Special African Chamber, set up in 2013 in collaboration with the African Union. Physically dragged into the courtroom, he did not stand nor respond when called on by the judge. He has denied any knowledge of murders and torture, often carried out by his dreaded intelligence police force. Reid Brody, a lawyer for Human Rights Watch working on behalf of Habré's victims, said the landmark case could encourage others to bring similar action. Habré has 2 weeks to launch an appeal.
And Gabrielle Weiniger now joins us in studio. Good evening.
Good evening, Merav. Thank you for having me.
First of all, how did this trial come about?
That's a very good question. Habré actually escaped Chad, which was then a former French colony, backed, interestingly, obviously by France, but interestingly also by the US, after a coup against him. So he was 8 years in power, and a coup led by current President Idriss Déby Itno overthrew him in 1990 after 8 years of oppressive rule. Now he fled to Senegal, where he lived for 22 years. That's really a long time to be running free when there are so many accusations, in fact tens of thousands of accusations against him, including, as we heard in the report, crimes against humanity, torture and rape. But eventually he was detained in Dakar, which is the capital of Senegal, back in July 2013. Interestingly, he was detained after a visit by current President Barack Obama, who expressed his support for a trial of Habré during a state visit to Dakar. It really gives you just an idea of how much clout America has as the world policeman to bring a former leader to trial. And actually, interestingly, this case is really unprecedented because it's the first time an African Union-backed court has tried a former ruler for human rights abuses, and the first time an African head of state has been charged and found guilty in a separate African country, not even in Chad, but in Senegal.
Now, Gabrielle, some 40,000 people killed during his term during those 8 years. Their relatives have been waiting a long time for this verdict. What has been the reaction?
I would say the images coming out of the court, outside the court in Senegal, really say it all. Many victims of Habré's rule welcomed the verdict. They were celebrating, they were rejoicing. For them, it's a culmination of 25 years of work to prosecute the former ruler. So it's a really historic day when you can see a group of survivors have managed to bring their oppressor to justice. The trial actually began last year, but it took a long time to collect the testimonies of up to 93 witnesses. I mean, it's not so many because, as we mentioned in the story, some 200,000 cases of torture, 40,000 cases of politically motivated murder, and a truth commission committee in 1992, Habré was accused, and his brutal police force, the Documentation Security Directorate, or DSS, of all of these murders, mostly against political opponents, most of them ethnic minorities.
And we've seen several heads of state in Africa who have been wanted or put on trial for such crimes. What does this mean for Africa in the future?
Well, I'm just going to say something on that point. There is certain accusations against the ICC for only trying African leaders, so I think that's worth noticing. This trial against Habré is much more specific because it happened in Senegal, his exile, his host country, and that really sets a precedent. What I would say is this is a milestone not only for justice for Africa, but actually for international justice as a whole.
Gabrielle Weiniger, thank you very much for joining us this evening.